My name is Mallory, and I'm 32 years old. I was standing in my childhood bedroom when my father's words hit me like ice water. Don't bother coming to Christmas this year. The phone felt heavy in my hand as shock rippled through my chest. My younger brother Trevor was bringing his successful fiancée home for the holidays, and apparently, my presence would embarrass the family. I stared at the faded wallpaper, remembering every achievement it earned that went unnoticed. Every time Trevor's mediocrity was celebrated like gold. My father's voice echoed in my ears, cold and final, as if erasing me from the family album was just another item on his holiday checklist. Before we dive deeper into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. Subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is about to take you through betrayal, courage, and the moment I finally chose myself. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when I show up to that Christmas party anyway. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up, I learned early that love in our house came with conditions and scorecards. Trevor, my younger brother who's now 28, was always the favorite. It didn't matter that I brought home straight, as while he barely scraped through with C's and D's. It didn't matter that I won academic scholarships while he collected participation trophies for sports he quit halfway through the season. My father Warren, who's 59, and my mother Diane, 56, seemed to have this unspoken agreement that Trevor's smallest efforts deserved celebration, while my genuine accomplishments were met with a shrug and a comment about not getting too proud. I remember my high school graduation, where I was valedictorian and had earned a full scholarship to the state university. My parents attended the ceremony, took a few photos, and then spent the entire dinner talking about Trevor's upcoming tryouts for the junior varsity basketball team. When Trevor barely graduated high school 3 years later, they threw him a massive party with a DJ, catered food, and invited half the neighborhood. I got a greeting card and $20 when I earned my bachelor's degree. The pattern continued into adulthood in ways both subtle and crushing. I paid my own way through college, working 2 part-time jobs while maintaining my grades, because my parents said they couldn't afford to help me. Yet, when Trevor enrolled in community college, they covered his tuition, rent, and spending money without hesitation. He dropped out after 1 semester, claiming college wasn't for him, and they didn't even seem disappointed. They just smiled and said he'd find his path eventually. Meanwhile, I'd become a 4th-grade teacher, a career I loved deeply but one that came with a modest salary and a studio apartment I could barely afford. I poured my heart into my students, won a Teacher of the Year award from the district, and organized community reading programs on weekends. My parents came to the awards ceremony but left early because Trevor had a sales presentation the next morning and needed help preparing. The sales job lasted 4 months before he was let go for poor performance, but that failure was never discussed at family dinners. Instead, they'd ask me when I was going to do something more ambitious with my life, as if shaping young minds wasn't ambitious enough. Then, Trevor started dating Penelope Ashworth, who's 26 and the daughter of a prominent real estate mogul in our city. Suddenly, Trevor was the golden boy who'd struck gold, and our parents couldn't stop talking about it. Penelope's father Bradford owned half the commercial properties downtown, and her mother Constance sat on the boards of multiple charities. They were old money, country club members, the kind of people my parents had always wanted to be. The phone call that banned me from Christmas came 2 weeks before the holiday. My father's voice was matter-of-fact, almost businesslike, as he explained that Trevor was bringing Penelope home, and that her family might attend the celebration. "We need to make the right impression," he said, and then came the words that cut deepest. "Your teacher salary and studio apartment aren't impressive, Mallory. Penelope's family is influential. We can't have you there making us look ordinary." I stood there in stunned silence as he continued, explaining that they'd rented a space at the country club, that everything needed to be perfect, that this was Trevor's big moment, and I needed to understand. My mother's voice was quiet in the background, saying nothing, her silence more damning than any words. When I finally found my voice to protest, to ask how they could exclude their own daughter, my father cut me off. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's practical. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The call ended, and I sat on my worn couch in my small apartment, feeling smaller than I ever had before. I called my older sister Geneva, who's 35, expecting sympathy or at least shared outrage. Geneva had always been the middle ground in our family, married to a moderately successful accountant named Clark. With 2 kids and a comfortable suburban house, she occupied a space between Trevor's golden status and my invisible existence, and I thought she might understand the cruelty of what our parents were doing. Instead, her response froze me to my core. "Honestly, Mallory, maybe they have a point," she said, her tone clinical and distant. "Trevor finally has a chance at a good life. Don't ruin it with your bitterness." I felt my breath catch. "Bitterness?" I repeated, but she was already launching into a lecture about family loyalty and thinking beyond myself. She reminded me that Shed worked hard to build her reputation with our parents, that Shed made strategic choices about her career and marriage, that maybe if I'd done the same, I wouldn't be in this position. The words felt rehearsed, as if Shed been preparing this speech. Then Geneva revealed something that made my blood run cold. "Mom and Dad asked me to handle you," she said casually, as if discussing weekend plans. "They wanted me to make sure you understood why you can't come. They thought you'd take it better coming from me." The betrayal doubled, tripled. Not only had my parents excluded me, but they'd recruited my sister to enforce their decision, and Shed agreed. I felt the ground shift beneath me as I realized this wasn't just my parents' choice, but a family conspiracy. Geneva continued, her voice taking on a patronizing edge that reminded me of every time Shed positioned herself as the successful daughter. She brought up past family gatherings where Shed taken credit for my ideas. Times when Shed subtly undermined me to elevate herself in our parents' eyes. It always told myself I was imagining things, that family dynamics were complicated, but now, the pattern was undeniable. She was protecting her own favored status by helping push me further into the margins. Geneva offered what she called a compromise, her voice dripping with false generosity. "You can come for dessert," she said. "After dinner. When the important conversations are done. If you dress appropriately and don't mention your job or your apartment. Just smile. Eat a piece of cake. And leave." I felt rage building in my chest. "Dress appropriately?" I asked. "What does that mean?" Geneva sighed, the sound heavy with judgment. "You know what I mean, Mallory. Something nice. Not your usual Target clearance section look. Maybe borrow something from a friend who has a real career." The cruelty was breathtaking. Shed just reduced my entire existence to a wardrobe problem. As if the right dress could make up for being treated as a family embarrassment. I tried to argue, to make her see how wrong this was, but she cut me off with more criticisms. "Still single at 32? Still teaching? When will you do something that matters?" Each question was a knife, and she wielded them expertly. The phone call ended with Geneva delivering her final verdict. "Some of us have to think about the family's reputation," she said. "Not just our own feelings. I'll see you for dessert, Mallory. If you decide to show up. But please, for everyone's sake, don't make a scene." The line went dead, and I sat there processing the magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just my parents anymore. My sister, who I'd trusted, who I'd defended when others criticized her choices, had aligned herself completely with the narrative that I was the family liability. The isolation felt complete, suffocating. I considered accepting the exile, just staying home and avoiding the humiliation of being the unwanted daughter. Then my phone buzzed with a text message from Trevor, and I realized the betrayals were just beginning. The text from Trevor was casual, almost gleeful in its carelessness. "Hey sis, heard you're sitting this one out. Probably for the best LOL." The LOL felt like a slap, the abbreviation trivializing my pain into a joke. My hands shook as I called him, needing to hear his voice, hoping for some shred of brotherly concern or explanation. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted and annoyed. "What's up? I don't have much time. I'm meeting Penelope for dinner." I asked him directly if he knew I'd been uninvited to Christmas, and his response was a non-committal hum. "Yeah, Dad mentioned it. Look, it's not a big deal. You understand how it is." His dismissiveness ignited something in me. "No, Trevor," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't understand how it is. Explain it to me. How is excluding your sister from Christmas not a big deal?" He sighed, and I could picture him rolling his eyes like he'd done our entire childhood whenever I tried to hold him accountable. "Penelope's family is old money, Mallory. Everything needs to be perfect. You know how you are. Always talking about your students and lesson plans. Nobody cares about that stuff." The words hung in the air, each one deliberate. Nobody cares. He'd said it so easily, as if my life's work was worth less than nothing. I pressed him, asking why he couldn't just introduce me as his sister and let me be myself. His answer revealed the depth of his betrayal. "Because I already told Penelope I'm an only child," he said flatly. "It was easier. Geneva's married with kids, she fits the narrative. You're just there." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You erased me?" I whispered. He laughed, actually laughed. "I didn't erase you. I just simplified things." "Don't be dramatic," Trevor went on to explain the real reason for my exclusion, his voice taking on an excited edge that made my stomach turn. "Dad's hoping Bradford Ashworth will invest in his contracting business. You know the company's been struggling. This Christmas party is basically a pitch meeting. Penelope's family is paying for everything, the venue, the catering, the decorations. It's their show, really. We're just the supporting cast. And supporting casts need to look good." I asked what that had to do with me, even though I already knew the answer. "You don't fit the image," he said simply. "Successful family, everyone thriving, united. A single teacher living in a studio apartment doesn't exactly scream success." I wanted to scream at him that success wasn't measured by money or status, that my students' progress and growth meant more than any business deal. But I knew he wouldn't hear it. Had been raised to value only what could be quantified in dollars and social standing. The final blow came when Trevor revealed details about the party itself. "It's not even at Mom and Dad's house. We rented space at the Riverside Country Club. Black tie, seated dinner. The works. Bradford's business associates will be there. Constance is bringing her charity board friends. This is Trevor's big debut into high society, and you'd just be a reminder that we're not really from that world." He said it without malice, which somehow made it worse. He genuinely believed what he was saying, genuinely thought it was reasonable to erase his sister for social advancement. I asked if Penelope knew anything about me, about our family's real history. Trevor hesitated, then admitted she knew about Geneva but thought I lived out of state and we weren't close. "It was easier than explaining why you wouldn't be at major family events," he said. Before I could respond, he cut the conversation short. "Look, I gotta go. Penelope's waiting. Maybe if you'd done something with your life, we wouldn't have to hide you." The call ended, and I sat in my silent apartment, feeling the full weight of my family's rejection settle over me like a burial shroud. 2 days after that devastating phone call, I went through the motions of teaching my 4th grade class, feeling hollowed out and mechanical. My students were working on their reading comprehension exercises when a small hand tugged on my sleeve. "Miss Mitchell, are you okay? You seem really sad." The concern in little Harper's eyes almost broke me, and I managed a weak smile, assuring her I was fine, just tired. But I wasn't fine, and apparently, it showed more than I realized. After the final bell rang, and my students filtered out into the afternoon, chattering about their holiday plans, I stayed at my desk, staring at the bulletin board covered in their artwork and essays. A knock on the doorframe made me look up, and I saw Iris Sullivan standing there. a former student of mine who was now 24 and working in public relations and marketing. Iris had been in my class years ago. A bright but struggling kid dealing with a difficult home situation. I'd spent extra time with her, helped her discover her love of writing, advocated for her when other teachers wanted to hold her back a grade. She'd gone on to excel, graduated with honors, and now worked for a prestigious PR firm downtown. She taught part-time at another school in our district, working with at-risk students the way I'd once worked with her. "Miss Mitchell," she said, using my old title with affection, "I was visiting the main office and heard you were still here. You looked so upset during the faculty meeting earlier. I had to check on you." The kindness in her voice, the genuine concern from someone I'd helped years ago, cracked something open inside me. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. The Christmas exclusion, my father's cruel words, Geneva's betrayal, Trevor erasing me from his life story, all of it poured out in a rush of words and tears. Iris listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to outrage as the story unfolded. When I finally finished, she stood up and paced my small classroom, her PR instincts clearly working through what I'd told her. "This is unbelievable," she said. "Your family is treating you like you're worthless when you're the most valuable person in the whole lot." Then she said something that made me look up. "I know of Penelope Ashworth. My firm handles social media crisis management, and we keep tabs on prominent families. She's not what your family thinks she is." Iris pulled out her phone and showed me Penelope's Instagram, a carefully curated collection of designer outfits, exotic vacations, and motivational quotes about hustle and authenticity. The irony of the authenticity posts wasn't lost on me. Iris explained that Penelope had a reputation in social circles as image-obsessed and shallow. Her family's money was relatively new. Her grandfather had struck it rich in real estate speculation only 2 generations ago. Not the old money breeding my parents seemed to think. Penelope was known for dating men she could elevate and show off, building her brand as a philanthropist and society figure. Iris' theory made terrible sense. Penelope is using Trevor to seem more grounded and family-oriented. She's always been criticized for being too flashy, too new money. Dating someone from a normal, close-knit family makes her look more relatable. Except your family isn't close-knit, and they're pretending you don't exist to maintain an illusion. Iris sat back down across from me, her eyes intense. "Don't let them erase you. Show up anyway." I immediately shook my head. I can't just crash the party. That would be exactly what they expect from me, proving I'm the embarrassment they think I am. Iris leaned forward. "No. They're already causing a scene by excluding you. Showing up isn't revenge, it's refusing to be erased." She offered to help me prepare, to give me a makeover and confidence coaching, to strategize my arrival so it'd be composed and dignified. I was torn, wanting to maintain my dignity but also terrified of making things worse. Iris must have seen my hesitation because she added, "You taught me to stand up for myself when I was 10 years old. You told me I deserved to be seen and heard. Time to take your own lesson, Miss Mitchell." She left her contact information on a sticky note, told me to think about it, and reminded me that she'd be there to help if I decided to attend. As she walked out, I stared at that sticky note, feeling the first spark of something that might have been courage or might have been defiance. But either way, it felt better than the hollow resignation I'd been carrying. A week before Christmas, I drove to Meadowbrook Assisted Living to visit my grandmother Lillian, who's 81 and sharp as ever despite her frail body. I'd been visiting her every Sunday for years, reading to her, bringing her favorite lemon cookies, listening to her stories about growing up during harder times. She was the one person in my family who'd always seen me, really seen me, and valued what I did. When I walked into her sunny room that Sunday, she was sitting by the window working on a crossword puzzle, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Mallory, darling," she said with genuine joy, "I've been counting the days until Christmas. I can't wait to see everyone together. Your father said it's going to be a beautiful celebration." My stomach dropped. I hadn't told her about the exclusion, hadn't wanted to upset her or put her in the middle of family drama. I sat down beside her and gently explained that I wouldn't be attending the Christmas party. Lillian's face went from confusion to shock to anger in rapid succession. "What do you mean you're not coming? Warren specifically told me this was a family reunion Christmas. That's why I gave him the money." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "You gave him money?" I asked carefully. Lillian nodded vigorously. $15,000. He said he wanted to do something special, bring the whole family together for a proper celebration. I told him it'd help, but only if everyone was included, especially you. You're my favorite grandchild, Mallory. You're the only one who visits me regularly, who remembers my birthday, who actually cares. The revelation hit me like a freight train. My parents had taken $15,000 from my grandmother under the explicit condition that I be included, then deliberately excluded me anyway. It was fraud, manipulation, financial elder abuse dressed up as party planning. Lillian became increasingly agitated, wanting to call my father immediately and demand an explanation. I calmed her down, promising to investigate and get to the bottom of it, but inside I was reeling. The cruelty had layers I hadn't imagined. It wasn't just about social climbing or impressing the Ashworths. My parents had stolen from my grandmother and lied to her face. Later that afternoon, I called my mother's cell phone, my hands shaking with rage. Diane answered on the second ring, her voice immediately defensive. "Mallory, this isn't a good time." I cut her off. "Did you and Dad take $15,000 from grandmother with the promise that all her grandchildren would be at Christmas?" Silence stretched between us. Then Diane sighed, the sound filled with irritation rather than shame. "Your grandmother misunderstood the conditions. She's getting older, her memory isn't what it was." I almost laughed at the audacity of the lie. Grandmother is sharper than both of us combined, and you know it. She has the mental capacity of someone half her age. She didn't misunderstand anything. You lied to her. My mother's voice turned cold and brittle. "We're securing your father's business future. Bradford Ashworth is considering a major investment. This Christmas party is essentially a business presentation. If we succeed, everyone benefits, including your grandmother. Her assisted living isn't cheap, Mallory. Maybe if you thought about the bigger picture instead of your hurt feelings, you'd understand we're trying to help the entire family." The gaslighting was breathtaking. They'd taken my grandmother's money under false pretenses, excluded me against her explicit wishes, and now they were framing it as financial responsibility and family planning. I tried to explain how wrong this was, how my grandmother's trust had been violated, how it'd been erased from family history for a business deal. Diane cut me off mid-sentence. "I have to go. The caterer is on the other line. Please don't upset your grandmother further with your version of events." She hung up before I could respond, and I sat there understanding that my parents were not just favoring Trevor or managing impressions. They were actively rewriting reality, gaslighting both me and my grandmother, and destroying family bonds for the possibility of money and social status. The decision crystallized in that moment, clear and unshakable. I would attend that Christmas party, not for revenge or to cause a scene, but to stand as living proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I refused to be erased from my own family story. I called Iris that evening and told her I'd decided to attend the party. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "I'm so proud of you. We're going to make sure you walk in there with your head high and your confidence intact." 2 days later, Iris arrived at my apartment with her friend Sutton, a 26-year-old woman who owned a boutique styling business downtown. Sutton had an artist's eye and a philosopher's approach to fashion. "We're not dressing you to impress anyone," she explained as she assessed my wardrobe. "We're dressing you to feel powerful and authentic. There's a difference." Over the next few hours, they helped me choose an elegant navy dress, simple but beautifully cut, with classic lines that spoke of quiet confidence rather than desperate flash. Sutton styled my hair in a soft updo and applied makeup that enhanced rather than transformed. The woman looking back at me from the mirror was still me, just more polished, more composed, more ready. During the preparation, Iris' phone buzzed with a text from a colleague who worked at the Riverside Country Club. Her expression darkened as she read the message. Mallory, there's something you need to know. Apparently, Trevor made a special request to the venue. He arranged for a professional photographer from a specific company to be at the party. Iris did some quick research on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. That photography company is owned by Penelope's family. They specialize in society event coverage and magazine spreads. She looked up at me, her expression grim. Trevor is staging your entire family Christmas as a backdrop for his engagement announcement. This isn't about family celebration. It's about his image. The news shouldn't have surprised me, but it added another layer of betrayal. My family wasn't just excluding me, they were commodifying their relationships, turning Christmas into a photo opportunity for Trevor's social climbing. Iris dug deeper, scrolling through social media and public records with the efficiency of a trained investigator. She discovered that Trevor had been lying to Penelope about significant aspects of his background. Head told her he graduated from college with a business degree. Records showed Head dropped out of community college after one semester. He claimed to have a successful career trajectory in sales with multiple companies courting him. Reality was a string of short-term jobs that ended in termination or resignation under pressure. Head even told Penelope that he was on track to take over our father's thriving contracting business. The truth was that Warren's company was barely surviving, hemorrhaging money, and facing potential bankruptcy. Trevor had constructed an entire false identity, and Penelope's family had apparently believed it, because they'd done only surface-level background checks. Not wanting to seem distrustful, part of me wanted to expose everything, to reveal Trevor's lies and watch the whole facade crumble. But Iris cautioned against that approach. If you go in there guns blazing with accusations, you become the villain in their story, the bitter sister trying to ruin her brother's happiness. But if you simply show up and be yourself, answer questions honestly when asked, let the truth emerge naturally, that's powerful. You're not attacking anyone, you're just existing, Sutton agreed, adding her perspective. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to disappear. You don't need to prove anything to these people. You just need to prove to yourself that you won't be erased. They spent the evening coaching me on how to handle potential confrontations, practicing calm responses to hostile questions, planning graceful exits if needed. Iris even role-played my father's anger, helping me prepare for his inevitable fury. By the time they left, I felt armored not with aggression but with quiet determination. I would attend the party not as the rejected daughter seeking validation but as a woman who knew her worth regardless of whether her family recognized it. December 23rd arrived cold and clear, the kind of winter day that looked beautiful but felt harsh. I drove to the Riverside Country Club 30 minutes after the party's start time, deliberately avoiding being early or fashionably late. The venue was stunning. All white lights and evergreen garlands, ice sculptures gleaming in the foyer, live music drifting from the ballroom. I could see my grandmother's money in every detail, the lavish catering setup, the champagne fountain, the designer floral arrangements. I approached the check-in table where a young coordinator held a guest list on an elegant clipboard. She smiled at me professionally. "Good evening, name please?" I answered, "Mallory Mitchell," and watched her expression shift from welcoming to confused. She scanned the list twice, then a third time. "I'm sorry, I don't have you on the list. Are you sure you're at the right event?" I kept my voice calm and clear. "I'm Warren Mitchell's daughter. This is a family Christmas party." The coordinator spoke quietly into a radio, requesting guidance, and moments later Geneva appeared from the ballroom, her face flushed red with a mixture of anger and panic. She speed-walked to the entrance, grabbed my arm with more force than necessary, and hissed through clenched teeth, "What are you doing here? We talked about this, Mallory. You agreed to stay away." I hadn't agreed to anything, but I didn't argue the point. Instead, I gently removed her hand from my arm and said clearly, "Grandmother Lillian paid for this party with the specific condition that all her grandchildren be included. I'm here." Geneva tried to physically position herself between me and the ballroom entrance, her voice rising slightly. "You're going to ruin everything. Trevor's engagement, Dad's business deal, all of it. Why can't you just let us have this one thing?" I met her eyes steadily. "This isn't a thing, Geneva. This is our family. And I'm part of it whether you want me here or not." I stepped around her and walked into the ballroom. My heart pounding but my steps steady. The space was breathtaking. All crystal chandeliers and elegant table settings. About 60 guests mingling with champagne glasses and hors d'oeuvres. I scanned the room and immediately spotted my parents holding court near the far end, deep in conversation with an distinguished older couple who had to be Bradford and Constance Ashworth. Trevor stood nearby with Penelope, who was stunning in a designer gown, dripping with jewelry that probably cost more than I made in a year. As I entered, several heads turned, and I saw my cousin Maxwell near the bar. His face lit up with genuine surprise and pleasure. "Mallory, I had no idea you were coming. This is great." He started walking toward me, and Geneva rushed to intercept him, pulling him aside and whispering frantically. I made my way toward the table where Grandmother Lillian sat with other elderly relatives, and her face transformed with joy when she saw me. "There's my girl. I knew you'd come." Her voice carried across the nearby tables, and I felt more eyes turning our way. I hugged her carefully, mindful of her frail frame, and felt tears pricking my eyes at her unconditional love. She said loudly enough for several people to hear, "I told Warren you had to be here. This is a family party. And your family." My father noticed the commotion and excused himself from the Ashworths. I watched him cross the ballroom floor, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes burning with barely controlled fury. He reached our table and gripped my arm just above the elbow, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "We need to talk. Outside. Now." I stood my ground, speaking in a normal tone that wouldn't cause alarm, but would carry to nearby listeners. "I'm here to celebrate Christmas with Grandmother." Exactly as she intended. Warren's grip tightened. "You're making a scene." I met his eyes and said clearly, "I'm greeting my grandmother." Nearby guests were definitely noticing the tension now, their conversations faltering as they watched our family drama unfold. My mother Diane rushed over, her society smile plastered on her face but her eyes panicked. She addressed the nearby guests with forced cheerfulness. "Family reunion excitement, so wonderful everyone could make it." Then she turned to me, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Coat check room, now. Don't make this worse than it already is." Across the ballroom, Trevor had noticed the disturbance. His face went pale as he saw me standing there in my navy dress, very much present and visible. Penelope looked at him with confusion, asking a question I couldn't hear. Trevor said something to her and started making his way toward us, leaving his fiancée standing alone looking bewildered. The confrontation was inevitable now, building like a storm. And I stood at the center of it feeling strangely calm. I'd spent my entire life trying to be small enough, quiet enough, acceptable enough for this family. Today, I would simply be present, and let them deal with the consequences of their own cruelty. The coat check room was small and windowless, lined with hooks holding expensive winter coats. I stood facing my parents, Trevor, and Geneva, all of whom looked at me with varying degrees of anger and panic. Warren exploded first, his voice low but venomous. "How dare you show up here after we explicitly told you not to come?" I kept my voice steady. "Grandmother Lillian gave you $15,000 for a family Christmas party with the explicit condition that all her grandchildren be included. I'm her grandchild. I'm here." Diane's turn came next, her manicured hands trembling slightly. "This is not the time or place for your petty grievances, Mallory. Think about what you're doing to your brother." I looked at Trevor, who was sweating despite the cool temperature. "Think about what I'm doing to him?" am not doing anything except existing. But apparently, that's too much to ask. Trevor stepped forward, his face flushed. You're going to ruin my engagement. Penelope's parents are out there right now. They're important people, influential people. I can't have you messing this up. I tilted my head. I didn't even know you were engaged. Congratulations, by the way. When were you planning to tell me about this major life event? Oh wait, that's right. You told Penelope you're an only child. Kind of hard to invite your sister to a wedding when you've erased her from existence. The color drained from Trevor's face. How do you know about that? I smiled without humor. I'm a teacher who cares deeply about my students. They grow up, they remember me, and they share information. You'd be surprised what people notice in social circles. Geneva jumped in, her voice sharp. How you know isn't the point. Are you seriously going to blackmail Trevor with this information? That's low, even for you. I turned to her, feeling decades of suppressed anger rising. This isn't blackmail, Geneva. Blackmail would be threatening to reveal information unless I get something in return. I'm not asking for anything except to be treated like a member of this family. I'm not demanding money or apologies or groveling. I'm just attending a Christmas party that my grandmother funded and that was supposed to include me. Warren tried a different approach, his voice dropping to something that might have been meant to sound reasonable. Mallory, we were trying to protect you. These people, the Ashworths and their associates, they're from a different world. We didn't want you to feel uncomfortable or out of place. The gaslighting was textbook perfect. Reframing exclusion as protection. I felt my resolve harden. By erasing me completely? By lying to grandmother? By taking her money under false pretenses? That's not protection, Dad. That's fraud. His face darkened at the word fraud. Watch your accusations, young lady. You're on very thin ice. I stepped forward. No, you're on thin ice. Grandmother specifically gave you that money with clear conditions. You violated those conditions. That's financial manipulation of an elderly person. I could report that. Trevor lunged toward me. So what? You're going to go out there and tell everyone? Destroy my relationship? Ruin Dad's business deal? Is that what this is about? Revenge? I met his eyes and spoke clearly. I'm going to go out there and be myself. I'm going to introduce myself to your fiancé honestly. I'm going to answer questions truthfully if anyone asks. I'm not planning to volunteer information or make accusations. But I also won't lie for you anymore. If Penelope asks me questions, I'll answer them honestly. That's not revenge. That's just integrity. The door opened and Maxwell walked in, his expression concerned. Everything okay in here? Penelope is asking questions. She wants to know why there's a family meeting happening and who Mallory is. Trevor's panic was visible now, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. What kind of questions? Maxwell shrugged. Normal questions. Like why she hadn't heard about you before. Why you're at the party if you were supposed to live out of state. Basic stuff. She seems more curious than upset. But her parents are noticing the tension. Geneva turned on Maxwell. This doesn't concern you, Max. Stay out of it. Maxwell looked at me, then at the rest of the family. Actually, it does concern me. Aunt Lillian is asking for Mallory. She wants her to sit at the family table for dinner. That's happening in 15 minutes. Warren straightened, trying to assert authority. Mallory isn't staying for dinner. This conversation is over. She's leaving. I looked at my father and felt something shift inside me. Some final chord of obligation snapping. I'm not leaving. I'm sitting with grandmother like she asked. You can try to physically remove me if you want, but that will cause the scene you're so desperate to avoid. I walked toward the door, and Warren moved to block my path. I stopped and looked up at him. This man who was supposed to protect me and champion me, who instead had spent my entire life diminishing me. You stopped being my father the moment you chose social climbing over your daughter. The words came out quiet but clear, and I saw him flinch. I pushed past him, through the door, and back into the ballroom where Penelope Ashworth was approaching with her parents flanking her. She had a pleasant expression but curious eyes, and I knew the moment of truth had arrived. Trevor scrambled out behind me, followed by the rest of my family, all of them trying to maintain composure while panic radiated from their every movement. Penelope reached us and smiled warmly at Trevor. "Darling, won't you introduce us to your family friend?" Trevor opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He stood there frozen, caught between the lie he'd built and the truth, standing right in front of him in a navy dress and quiet determination. I extended my hand to Penelope with a genuine smile. Mallory Mitchell, Trevor's older sister. I watched confusion flicker across her beautiful features, followed by a dawning realization. Sister? But Trevor said he's an only child. The awkward silence stretched like taffy, pulling thinner and thinner until Bradford Ashworth's voice cut through it, sharp and assessing. "Is there something we should know?" Trevor attempted to laugh it off, his voice too high and strained. I said I felt like an only child growing up. Mallory was so much older, off at college. It was like being raised as a single kid. I spoke gently, not wanting to attack but unwilling to support the lie. I'm 4 years older than Trevor. We grew up in the same house, shared the same childhood. Warren stepped in quickly, his business voice smooth. Mallory lives out of state now. We don't see her often. Family dynamics can be complicated. I shook my head slightly. I live 20 minutes away. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. I've been in the same school district for 8 years. Penelope turned to Trevor, her expression shifting from confused to concerned. "You told me your family was all in business together, your father's company, you in sales, everyone working toward the same goals." Trevor was sweating visibly now. "Dad is in contracting. I'm in sales. It's related industries." Geneva attempted damage control, her voice bright and artificial. "Penelope, that dress is absolutely stunning. Is it Valentino?" I've been dying to ask. But Constance Ashworth was too sharp for distraction tactics. She looked at me with the assessment of someone who'd spent decades navigating social circles and sniffing out deception. "I'm quite confused, dear. Why wasn't Trevor's sister mentioned when we discussed his family background? Why weren't you at the engagement planning meetings?" Diane tried desperately to redirect. "Family dynamics are complicated, as I said. Mallory has chosen to be distant. She has her own life." I felt the anger had been controlling finally surface. Not explosive but steady and clear. "That's not true. I was uninvited to this party because my parents thought I would embarrass them in front of you." The words dropped like stones into still water, ripples of shock spreading across the faces around us. Gasps came from nearby guests who'd been pretending not to listen but were clearly hanging on every word. Bradford's expression hardened. "Excuse me?" Warren's face went red. "Mallory, that is enough." I kept my voice calm but audible. "It's not enough. It's true. Grandmother Lillian gave my father $15,000 for this Christmas party with the explicit condition that all her grandchildren be included. I was deliberately excluded because my career as a teacher and my modest apartment were considered embarrassing compared to the image my family wanted to project." Lillian's voice carried from her nearby table, strong despite her age. "That's absolutely true. I gave Warren that money specifically for a family gathering. All my grandchildren. All of them." Constance looked at her husband, then at Trevor and my parents. "This is highly inappropriate. I'm not comfortable with any of this." Trevor reached for Penelope's hand. "Baby, please, let me explain. Just give me a chance to talk to you privately." Penelope stepped back, pulling her hand away. "Explain what, Trevor? That you lied about your family? About having a sister? What else did you lie about?" Maxwell, bless him, chose that moment to step forward. "For what it's worth, Mallory is actually the successful one in this family. Full academic scholarship to college. Teacher of the Year award multiple times. Dedicated her entire life to helping kids. She's probably helped shape more futures than any of us." Geneva whirled on him. "Maxwell, stay out of this." He met her glare without flinching. No. I've watched this family treat Mallory like she's worthless for too long. She's worth more than all of us combined. And it's time someone said it. Other relatives were gathering now. Aunts and uncles and cousins, all drawn by the commotion. Warren's sister Loretta pushed through the crowd. Warren, what on earth is happening here? Warren tried to maintain control. This is a private family matter, Loretta. Bradford Ashworth disagreed. It stopped being private when you sought a major investment in your business while misrepresenting your family situation. You presented yourself as united and successful. This is clearly neither. Warren sputtered. I never made any false representations. Bradford's expression was ice. You allowed my daughter to enter a relationship with your son under completely false pretenses. He claimed to be an only child. He claimed to have graduated from college. My assistant ran a preliminary background check and found nothing because Penelope told us not to look too deeply into educational records. She vouched for him based on your family's representations. Penelope's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Trevor. Did you lie about college too? Did you even attend? Trevor's silence was answer enough. She fumbled with the engagement ring on her finger, her hands shaking. Oh my God. My parents ran a background check on you. It came back mostly clean because I told them you were trustworthy, that your family was good people. I vouched for you. Constance moved to her daughter's side. Penelope, we're leaving. Now. Penelope slipped the ring off her finger and held it out to Trevor. I can't do this. I thought I knew you. I thought I was marrying into a real family. But this is all lies. Trevor's face crumpled as he stared at the ring. Penelope, please. Don't do this here. She pressed the ring into his palm. Goodbye, Trevor. Then she turned to me, and I braced for anger or blame. Instead, her eyes held something like respect. I'm sorry you were treated this way. You deserved better from your family. The Ashworth family left in a sweep of expensive coats and wounded dignity. The ballroom erupted in whispers and shocked conversations. Warren's face transformed from red to purple as he turned on me. You destroyed this family. Everything we worked for. Gone because of your selfishness. I stood my ground. No, Dad. You destroyed this family when you decided money and status mattered more than your children. When you raised Trevor to believe he could lie and cheat his way through life. When you taught all of us that love was conditional on success. Diane was crying, mascara running down her carefully made-up face. How could you do this? How could you ruin your brother's life? I felt tears on my own cheeks now. How could you erase me? Your own daughter? Trevor moved toward me, rage contorting his features, and Maxwell stepped between us instantly. Back off, Trevor. You've done enough damage. Geneva pointed at me, her voice shrill. This is all your fault, Mallory. Everything we built, everything we worked toward, destroyed by your bitterness and jealousy. Grandmother Lillian stood, her elderly frame trembling but her voice powerful. Enough. All of you. Enough. Warren, you should be ashamed of yourself. Deeply ashamed. Mallory is worth 10 of the rest of you combined. She has integrity, compassion, and dedication. Everything you should have taught Trevor instead of feeding his ego and enabling his lies. Lillian held out her hand to me. Come, sweetheart, let's go back to my residence. We'll have our own Christmas. A real one with people who know what family actually means. I moved to help her gather her coat and purse, and several other relatives stepped forward. Maxwell was first. I'm coming with you, Aunt Lillian. Aunt Loretta, my father's sister who'd always been kind to me, nodded firmly. So am I. Uncle Frank, Loretta's husband, added his agreement. Count us in. A handful of cousins, the ones who'd never bought into the golden child narrative, joined our small exodus. Behind us, Warren, Diane, Trevor, and Geneva stood in the wreckage of their carefully constructed facade. The ballroom was half empty now, guests leaving in awkward clusters, the catered dinner growing cold, the elaborate decorations suddenly looking garish rather than elegant. As we walked out of the Riverside Country Club into the cold December night, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd lost the family I'd been born into. But I was discovering a family of choice, people who valued authenticity over appearance. Grandmother squeezed my hand as we walked to the cars. "I'm proud of you, Mallory. So very proud." The weeks following that catastrophic Christmas became a period of unexpected healing and growth. My small studio apartment, which I'd always felt embarrassed about, became a gathering place for the relatives who'd left the party with me. We organized a real Christmas celebration, simple and genuine, with potluck dishes and handmade gifts and laughter that came from actual joy rather than performance. Grandmother Lillian held court from my second-hand armchair, telling stories of Christmases past when family meant something real. Maxwell apologized repeatedly for not standing up for me sooner, and I forgave him because courage has to start somewhere, and at least Head found his eventually. Aunt Loretta confessed she'd always known Warren played favorites but hadn't wanted to cause family discord by speaking up. The guilt in her voice was real, and I understood. Sometimes it's easier to enable dysfunction than to challenge it, even when you know better. News of what happened spread through extended family and social networks with the speed of scandal. The responses were mixed but illuminating. Some relatives sided with Warren and Diane, believing I'd been vindictive and should have stayed away. Others expressed support for me, sharing their own stories of feeling undervalued or overlooked in family dynamics. Former students reached out via social media, many now adults, telling me how much ID meant to them, and how proud they were that ID stood up for myself. Parents of current students sent cards and messages thanking me for modeling integrity and self-respect for their children. The outpouring of support from people ID touched through teaching reminded me that family isn't just blood. It's the connections we build through showing up authentically in the world. The consequences for my immediate family were swift and severe. Bradford Ashworth not only withdrew his investment consideration but apparently spread word through his business networks that Warren Mitchell was untrustworthy. My father's contracting company, already struggling, faced a cascade of cancelled contracts and lost bids. Within 2 months, he was forced to file for bankruptcy. Trevor moved back into my parents' house, unable to afford his apartment, without Penelope's financial support, which had been more extensive than ID realized. The sales job Head had at the time of the party ended abruptly, and his job search yielded nothing as word of the engagement scandal spread through the professional community. Geneva stopped speaking to me entirely, sending a single cold email explaining that I'd betrayed the family and she wanted no contact. The email hurt less than I expected. I was beginning to understand that losing relationships built on conditional love and shared dysfunction wasn't actually loss. It was liberation. My mother Diane sent occasional text messages, always brief and manipulative. "I hope you're satisfied. Your father is devastated. Your brother can't find work. The family is destroyed." I didn't respond, recognizing the attempts at guilt for what they were. My father tried a different approach, suggesting family therapy in an email that managed to sound simultaneously conciliatory and accusatory. While family counseling might be beneficial for processing recent events and rebuilding trust, we need to acknowledge that your actions at the Christmas party were the precipitating factor in our current difficulties. I wrote back once, my response simple and clear. "I'll consider family therapy when you can acknowledge that excluding me was wrong, that using grandmother's money under false pretenses was wrong, and that raising Trevor to believe image matters more than integrity was wrong. Until then, I need distance." He never replied. January brought the unexpected return of Iris into my life, now not just as a former student but as a genuine friend. Shed followed the aftermath of the Christmas party with the interest of someone who understood both personal trauma and social dynamics. Over coffee one Saturday, she shared that the story had made rounds in PR circles as a cautionary tale about the dangers of image management over authenticity. Some of Penelope's social media followers had turned on her briefly, accusing her of being classist for dating Trevor only when she thought his family was impressive, but Iris explained that Penelope had handled it well. Shed posted a thoughtful message about learning to value substance over surface, and had shifted her social media presence to focus less on luxury and more on genuine charitable work. I felt no animosity toward Penelope. She'd been lied to as much as anyone. And Shed had the courage to walk away when the truth emerged. Spring arrived with renewal and unexpected possibilities. I threw myself into my teaching with even more dedication, if that was possible, and my students responded with enthusiasm and growth that made every challenging day worthwhile. In April, our school district recognized my work with a special commendation, and standing on that stage accepting the award, I looked out at an audience filled with students, parents, colleagues, and yes, grandmother Lillian and Maxwell and Aunt Loretta, and I felt successful in ways that had nothing to do with money or status. After the ceremony, a colleague approached me, someone I'd worked alongside for 3 years but never gotten to know well. Justin taught music, was 34, and had always been quietly supportive but distant. He congratulated me on the award and then, with visible nervousness, asked if I'd like to have coffee sometime. I hesitated. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I was still healing, still learning to trust. Justin must have seen my uncertainty, because he added quickly, "I've admired you for a long time, Mallory. Not just as a teacher, though you're incredible at that, but as a person. What you did at that Christmas party, standing up for yourself, refusing to be erased. That took real courage. I'd like to get to know you better, if you're open to it. No pressure, no expectations. Just coffee and conversation." We started slowly, meeting for coffee that turned into walks in the park that turned into dinners at small restaurants where we talked for hours. Justin shared his own story of family estrangement. A father who'd wanted him to be a lawyer and had cut off contact when he chose music education instead. We bonded over understanding what it meant to disappoint family by choosing authenticity over expectation. The relationship developed with a gentleness and respect I hadn't known was possible, built on seeing and valuing each other as we actually were, rather than who we might be useful as being. Summer brought closure I hadn't expected. Grandmother Lillian passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82. The call came early on a Tuesday morning, and even though I'd known her health was declining, the loss felt enormous. She'd been my champion, my supporter, the one person in my biological family who'd loved me unconditionally. The funeral was held on a hot June afternoon, and I stood in the front row with Maxwell, Aunt Loretta, Uncle Frank, and the cousins who'd become my chosen family. Warren, Diane, Trevor, and Geneva attended but stayed in the back, their presence a dark cloud of unresolved resentment. We didn't speak, there was nothing left to say. After the service, Lillian's lawyer read her will, and I learned she'd left me the bulk of her estate with a letter explaining her decision. The letter was typed on her old typewriter, the letters slightly uneven but the message crystal clear. My dearest Mallory, if you're reading this, I'm gone but not forgotten. I hope. I want you to know that I always saw you. Really saw you. While your parents were busy polishing Trevor's mediocrity into something they could brag about, I watched you become a woman of substance and integrity. You gave without expecting return. You cared when it cost you. You showed up week after week to visit an old woman when you had every excuse to be too busy. That's who you are. That's what matters. I'm leaving you most of what I have because I trust you to use it wisely and well, not for fancy things or show, but for making a real difference. I've also included instructions that Warren must acknowledge in writing what he did wrong before receiving his portion. I won't hold my breath on that happening, but hope springs eternal. Be proud of yourself, sweetheart. I am. The letter was signed with her shaky signature, and I cried reading it, mourning her loss but grateful for her love. Warren contested the will immediately, claiming I'd exercised undue influence over Lillian in her final years. The legal battle was brief and decisive. Lillian's lawyer produced years of documentation showing her sharp mental state, her clear intentions, and the timeline of when she'd made various decisions about her estate. The judge dismissed Warren's challenge with barely concealed contempt, noting that the evidence suggested Warren himself had exercised undue influence by taking $15,000 under false pretenses for the Christmas party. My father left the courthouse looking years older, defeat written in every line of his face. I felt no satisfaction in his loss, only sadness that it had come to this, that his choices had destroyed what could have been a loving family. I used Lillian's inheritance to establish a scholarship fund for students from underprivileged backgrounds who wanted to pursue teaching careers. The Lillian Morrison Education Scholarship would provide full tuition support and living expenses for 2 students per year, with preference given to those who had overcome significant obstacles. I named it after my grandmother, ensuring her legacy would be one of genuine support and opportunity rather than the manipulation her son had attempted. The first 2 recipients were announced in the fall, and I attended the award ceremony feeling Lillian's presence, imagining her pride. This was what family money should do: build up, create opportunity, change lives for the better. Not by country club parties and false appearances. Trevor sent me one final message that October, a late-night text that reeked of alcohol and bitterness. "You took everything from me, my fiancé, my family, my father's business, even grandmother's money. I hope you're happy with what you destroyed." I stared at that message for a long time before responding. "I didn't take anything from you, Trevor. You built a life on lies, and it collapsed under its own weight. I just refused to disappear to make your illusions easier to maintain. The difference matters." I blocked his number after that, and with it, I blocked the final connection to the family that had raised me, but never really known me. It was time to fully commit to the family I'd built, the one based on choice and authenticity rather than obligation and pretense. 1 year after that catastrophic Christmas party, I found myself in my apartment on Christmas Eve surrounded by people I loved and who loved me back. Justin was in my small kitchen cooking his grandmother's pasta recipe, filling the space with the scent of garlic and herbs. Maxwell was setting up my tiny tree with ornaments made by my students, each one telling a story of growth and connection. Iris and Sutton arrived with wine and laughter, and Aunt Loretta brought her famous pecan pie. We gathered around my second-hand table, squeezing in close, and someone suggested we toast to Lillian. We raised our glasses, and I felt tears on my cheeks but also joy in my heart. Looking around at these faces, these people who'd chosen to be here, I realized something profound. Being excluded from that Christmas party last year had felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I understood it had been a gift, a painful but necessary catalyst that forced me to see toxic patterns clearly and choose myself finally. "Some families are born," I said quietly, and everyone went still to listen. "Others are built. And some of us are brave enough to do both by walking away from the first to make room for the second. This Christmas, surrounded by people who truly see me, I'm not the daughter who was erased, I'm the woman who refused to disappear. And that makes all the difference." The room erupted in agreement, in cheers, in the kind of celebration that comes from shared understanding and authentic connection. As the evening wore on, filled with games and stories and the comfortable silences of people who don't need to perform for each other, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked happy, not the forced smile of someone trying to convince themselves, but the genuine contentment of someone who'd fought for their worth and won, not by defeating anyone else, but by refusing to abandon herself. The journey had been painful, filled with losses and betrayals that still stung when I let myself dwell on them. But it had also been necessary, the only path to becoming who I was meant to be rather than who my family needed me to be. I thought about my students, the ones who struggled with self-worth and family expectations, and I knew my story would help me guide them better. I'd lived through choosing authenticity over approval, and I'd survived. More than survived, I'd flourished. As midnight approached and we counted down to Christmas Day, Justin's hand found mine and squeezed gently. "This is a good life," he whispered. "A real one." I squeezed back and nodded because he was right. This was real, messy and imperfect and small, in all the ways society says don't matter. but real in all the ways that actually do. The family I'd lost had taught me what love shouldn't look like: conditional and performative and ultimately hollow. The family I'd found taught me what it could be: accepting and supportive and endlessly renewable. I chose this. Every day, I chose this. And that choice, that continuous recommitment to authenticity over comfort, to truth over convenience, made all the difference in the world. So tell me, have you ever had to choose between being accepted and being authentic? Have you walked away from toxic family dynamics? Or are you still trying to figure out how? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'd love to hear your stories and support you on your journey. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you feel less alone in your own struggles, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories about courage, healing, and finding your way home to yourself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy, but sometimes the hardest truths are the most important ones to tell. Wishing you all a Christmas filled with genuine love, authentic connections, and the courage to be exactly who you are, even when it costs you everything you thought you needed. You're worth it. I promise, you're worth it. Take care of yourselves, and remember, family is what we make it, not what we're born into. Happy holidays, everyone.